At the beginning of this year, Netflix removed almost all the shows I watch. I had to move to Prime, where I needed to buy Paramount and Disney Plus and Hulu add-ons just to watch the same shows. So now I have 2 or 3 extra subscriptions for the same movies. In the same month, Apple released Creative Studio, a subscription service as well. They repackaged several of the softwares that were previously one-time purchases into subscriptions. Very soon, it will be impossible to own any of their softwares truly. Then it hit me. I finally feel the subscription fatigue. I've lost count of how many subscription services I have opted in. Accommodation, food, transportation, music, our software, entertainment, all our tools, everything is now on some kind of monthly leash. And sometimes I genuinely wonder, are we heading into a future where we will never own anything again? We will just keep paying for the privilege of using it until we die. It starts off harmless, just Netflix, then Spotify, then HBO, then YouTube Premium, then ChatGPT Premium, and fast forward a few years, all the subscription economy is a multi-trillion-dollar machine. Researchers estimate global subscription revenues pushing well past $1 trillion as companies race to turn everything into recurring payments. Businesses worship ARR, which is the annual recurring revenue, and investors reward this with higher valuation. Articles calls this the future of business, and it's a win-win for everyone. But on the consumer side, the story feels different. By 2025, analysts were already talking about subscription fatigue. The households quietly spending hundreds per month on a pile of digital services, many of them barely used, and only realizing how bad it is when they finally audit their bank statements. Economists even have a polite phrase for this: the shift from ownership to access. Instead of owning, you subscribe to software, you lease your chair, you stream your media, you store your files on someone else's server. Academic work on the subscription economy points out that this model changes how we perceive value. We stop thinking in terms of equity and start thinking in terms of access. Access feels lighter and faster. There's no big upfront cost. There's no long decision. Just start your field trial and let the direct debit undo the rest. For companies, these are predictable revenue streams, but for households, they become permanent fixed costs. For everything you need, you sign up for a relationship with a billing system. For most people, rent or mortgage is the biggest line item in the budget. In many OECD countries, a scary share of the population spends more than 40% of their disposable income just on housing costs, rent, mortgage, plus other utilities. In parts of Europe, private renters are especially squeezed, with a significant chunk of them crossing that 40% threshold. That is almost half your take-home pay gone before you've even eaten, moved, or done anything remotely fun. Owning a home is still technically possible, but look at the data. Younger generations are buying, but at a slower and later and less often than their parents. In 2025 data, Gen Z and millennials are behind older generations by a wide margin on home ownership, with many locked into long-term renting or extreme mortgages. So your options look like this: you rent forever and accept a permanent housing subscription, or you sign a 25 to 30-year mortgage, which is another kind of subscription, just with a bank logo. Either way, a chunk of your future life is pre-sold. Now combine housing that takes 30 to 40% of your income or more for many people. You combine it with debts and loans and credits and insurance premiums and transport costs, then sprinkle 10 to 20 subscriptions from streaming and software and cloud and productivity and gym and gaming, etc. Reports on subscription spending show the same pattern. People underestimate how much they spend. They regularly experience bill shock when they add it all up and feel the real financial strain as these recurring charges compete with groceries, with fuel, and basic life costs. We like to think we are living better than past generations because we have more access, we have more content, we have more apps. But what good is access to everything if you are one missed payment away from losing it all? We are not living paycheck to paycheck, we are living from auto debit to auto debit. Remember that phrase that went viral a few years ago, "You will own nothing and be happy"? It came from a speculative piece linked to the World Economic Forum about a 2030 future when people rely heavily on shared services instead of owning things outright. The internet turned it into a dystopian meme, a warning, a conspiracy talking point. But forget the politics for a second. Look at the pattern. Entertainment is streamed and not owned. Software is subscribed, not bought. Cars are leased and financed and locked behind these features as a service. Housing is rented or mortgaged for decades. Critics of that own nothing vision pointed out exactly this fear. Not that someone will seize your stuff, but that everything will be restructured as a subscription or a service model that you will never escape from. You will own nothing because business models have evolved to make ownership a bad deal and renting the default. From the system's perspective, this is brilliant. We have this stable recurring revenue for companies. You have higher valuations for investors. You have these predictable cash flows for banks and landlords. But from your own perspective, it looks like just modern life. But this is truly dark. The more your life is structured as recurring payments, which are the rent and the mortgages and subscriptions, the less optional any of this feels and the more locked in you become. You don't feel poor in the traditional sense. You may even have a decent salary, decent gadgets and multiple accounts, yet you feel permanently on the edge. One job loss, one medical issue, a few bad months, and your whole life starts to crumble. I'm not saying we should go back to the Stone Age. I use subscriptions, I parent. Sometimes I get why these models exist. For some, they are necessary. For others, I really don't understand why. It just seems like a way to infuse the MRR into a LinkedIn post. But I can't shake this question. At what point does convenience turn into a soft, quiet kind of financial captivity? When a huge part of its salary is already pre-assigned to landlords, banks, and insurance companies, and platforms, and the rest is slowly eaten by digital subscriptions that you barely even track. Can we really say we own our lives? Or are we just well-dressed, well-connected tenants in an economy that bills us for everything forever? Because if the trend lines keep going the way the data suggests, we will have more subscriptions, more rentership, more households spending extreme shares of income just to stay afloat. Then you will truly own nothing. We, however, can argue that without subscriptions, we may not be able to afford most services if we needed to pay all costs upfront. Fair enough. Also, it would be a waste of money to pay a huge amount of money for a software we may need to use a couple of times. I, however, want to hear your opinion. Do you think the subscription economy is a good and necessary thing? If not, let me know what the realistic alternative is. And if you're interested in more honest, no hype conversations like these, Please subscribe, leave a like, and share this with your friends. I'll see you in my next video.